Welcome to the Southbound Podcast, stories of influential leaders shaping the South. I am Patrick Reed, one of your hosts with Peyton Howe. I represent Blue Water Civil Design as their Director of Business Development. And Peyton Howe, co-host.
Yeah, welcome. I'm with Harper General Contractors. I'm the Director of our Industrial Division, and we're looking forward to having guests on the show to really bring you all about the information, what Southbound Podcast is going to be able to share with you.
Yeah, and Southbound really kind of is a great podcast for you guys to listen to, for anyone that really wants to understand how we were there and got to here over the past 4 decades. And we've really kind of dug real deep into figuring out who would be a good group of people to tell the behind the scenes stories, to share kind of some pivotal moments that really kind of made the South a target for people to plant their families, to grow their business, to bring their company here and relocate and make it a wonderful place. And
as everybody knows, the South is people are migrating to the South by the droves. Every day, I keep hearing stories about how many families are moving to our region. Just the quality of life we have here in the South, the enormous career opportunities we have. We have major manufacturers here. We have wonderful hospital systems. We have wonderful environment, outdoor places for people to do things on the weekends, and we have a wonderful education system. So this Southbound idea is not only just about everyone that wants to move here, but we really wanted to share some time with you with some very key and influential people that are help shaping this development. Why are people wanting to move here? Well, we're going to listen from our good friend Jon Good. Patrick, you want to introduce Jon?
Yeah, so Jon Good is CEO of NAI Earle Furman, NAI Columbia, and NAI Greensboro Triad. And he's risen to the rank as CEO from a young age as one of the largest real estate brokerage firms in the Carolinas, and has a lot of great stories to share with you guys today. And he's thoroughly impressive, but one of the things that I appreciate about Jon is he's not all assuming and eats up the room. He's quietly done a lot of great things, and I think that you guys are really going to enjoy listening to some of the stuff that he's going to share with you that's going to really make your lives better personally and professionally. Because when we've had some preliminary conversations with Jon, he's made instant impressions upon us as people, and it really is going to show how and why he's become CEO of one of the largest brokerage firms in the entire in the Carolinas. So, Jon, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I appreciate y'all inviting me to join you and chat a little bit about my story.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. We're Peyton and I discussed a lot about who all we should invite and who should be a guest, and constantly at the top of the list was Jon Good, and we kept going back and forth on this, and when we had our initial preliminary meeting, we were just blown away and floored, and so we're excited to hear those stories that you're going to share with us today. But first, tell us real quick. You're 46 years old, celebrating a birthday last week?
I did.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So being 46 years old and CEO of one of the largest brokerage firms in the Carolinas, tell us a little bit about some of your background and some of the influential people in your life.
Where did you grow up, Jon?
Sure. So amazingly enough, there are fewer and fewer of us here in Greenville these days, but I grew up in Greenville. I was born in Greenville. My mother's family moved here in 1950 from Lancaster. So I grew up here, product of Greenville County public education system, and it's been an interesting ride to see how Greenville has changed since the 70s and 80s till today. Kind of along the lines of talking about people moving here. I went back and tried to calculate how many people I could remember from kindergarten to 12th grade that moved to Greenville. And I came up with 5 of my buddies whose parents came here to join Daniel when Fluor merged with Daniel Construction back in the day, or maybe a Michelin, later in my, high school days. And so I can come up with 5. If you ask one of my 3 children how many of their friends moved here from somewhere else, they quit counting at 50. They probably have 100.
Right.
It's truly amazing to see the growth of how everything has gone. So I grew up here, stayed here, went to Furman University. My father would tell you that, and he's right, he came to me and said, you don't have to go to Furman. After my second brother went to Furman, and both of my parents and 2 aunts and 2 uncles and a pile of cousins had all been there.
He said, choice.
He's like, you don't have to go to Furman. I was like, okay, I'm going to be the one person in the family that everybody thought couldn't get in or flunked out or whatever the case may be. So I stayed, went to Furman.
Right.
And it was really cool to see the difference in the upstate from the early 90s to the late 90s.
Yeah.
So my oldest brother finished in the early 90s. And if you finished school and were from the upstate in the early 90s, you had 2 options if you wanted a job. You would go to Atlanta or you would go to Charlotte. And so my oldest brother, all his friends went to Atlanta or Charlotte. Mm-hmm. And before the upstate started going, they started having kids and they were set there. By the time I got out and all of my friends, before we started having kids in the early 2000s, Greenville was popping. So really my oldest brother, who's only 4 years older, all of his buddies are displaced.
Right.
And all my buddies all came home, had their kids here, right? Because the opportunities were here by then. So it's been neat to watch that happen.
Right. Yeah. So I'm a little bit in a similar situation. I had my 3 older brothers go to the Citadel, so I didn't really have much of a choice. And then, of course, my younger brother followed suit. So I feel you there on the Furman story. That's awesome. That's fascinating. I'm also born and raised in the upstate. Peyton?
Also born and raised in Spartanburg, South Carolina, just down the road from Greenville. And it's been interesting kind of as I've moved into my business career in this location somewhere about 30 years ago. The separation that was originally here between Greenville and Spartanburg, there was this competition, and there may be some still underlying things there. But I think for the most part, with the development that's happened, and really the severe growth that's kind of happened in the probably the automotive, I'd have to say the automotive industry probably triggered this. But I feel like Greenville Spartanburg has truly become a very, very unique and I guess accommodating as well as collaborative 2 counties. And we all want to compete and we want to get the jobs in each county, but I really think that is a really crucial key part to the success of our region, is that we know how to collaborate with one another, whether it's talking with a competitor or talking with another county or talking with the low country, working out with the up country. And even I'll go as far as to say outside of the sports arena and the football field, there's a lot of things that Clemson University and University of South Carolina do that to collaborate with one another. So to me, that South Carolina has that real feel of family. And I think it's so important to understand that a lot of our influential leaders here in this area place family probably as high as anywhere else on their day-to-day. What do we do for day-to-day? Why do we want to get up and go to work? I think family is a big driver to that. And to that, John, I'd kind of, as we talk a little bit about how you became the success story that you are, how you became president of NAI, Tell us a little bit about your family. We know we always want to hear about mentors, and mentors to me, I think back on some of my mentors, in my early days of coming into a career, or whether it be a coach, early in my days when I used to play. I played junior tennis, and so we had coaches on the high school team that were very influential to us. So tell us a little bit about maybe some of your mentors and how family kind of coincides with some of that.
Sure. And I've been very fortunate to have some phenomenal mentors in my life, which makes all the difference in the world for anybody. And so it's hard to come up with a short list, because really there's dozens of people that changed the way I thought about things and improved my life. But if we start with family, the two biggest are family. And so, the first is certainly my father. So my father, he came to Furman sight unseen to play tennis. He was in Chattanooga, Tennessee, growing up. He's got a great story that really, it's been told maybe once, just because people don't like to tell their own story. But so his parents were just poor mountain people in Chattanooga. He was one of four, and he had a teacher that fell in love with him and thought he was the most well-mannered child. And for those of us who have little boys, know it's hard to have a little boy that's well-mannered sometimes. Yeah. And so she really took a liking to him and shepherded him as he was growing up. And so when he was in sixth grade, she actually applied for a scholarship on his behalf for him to go to Macaulay, which is a fancy boarding school in Chattanooga. They do have day students. And so he was offered a position to come as a day student at Macaulay, which was life-changing for him. So he started in seventh grade, as they did back in those days. And that Christmas, my grandfather, his father, came home as excited as my grandmother had ever seen him. Told her to go, grab one of the chickens out of the backyard because they were going to have a feast to celebrate, because he had been promoted. He'd worked on the line at Stanley Tool in Chattanooga, and he was going to become a supervisor. And so they're all excited and moving along, except, his supervisor position was in Dallas. And so Christmas hits, and at the start of the year, he went on to Dallas, and my grandmother stayed with my two aunts. Were already out of the house, but my dad and his little brother were still there. So she stayed through the school year. And then that summer they moved to Dallas. The decision was made to allow my dad then in eighth grade to come back to Chattanooga and live with his cousin and his wife, who were just a few years older than them, that lived across the street. And so my dad's name is Ed Good. And so Eddie, as he was, in the 50s and 60s, stayed, lived in the basement of his cousin's house, and went to Macaulay as a day student from eighth grade on. And so, long way to get to the story part. So
that's a fascinating story, because that just won't exist in this modern age. Obviously, it's just
very rare.
We lived a different life back then, but that's very amazing, and also a huge testament to your father.
So when I was in high school, I was looking through his yearbooks, and I had his senior yearbook, and I'm looking at it, and they show all your activities like they still do in your yearbook of, varsity football or whatever it was, all the way through. And his section of his activities was this long. It went on forever. He did every single thing. I was like, how could you possibly have done so much? And he said, it was twofold. One, I was getting to go for free. And so I felt obligated to contribute at every opportunity that I could give back to Macaulay for the gift that they had given me. And then two, what else was I going to do? Go sit at home by myself, because his cousin and his wife were at work. And so he took that opportunity. It was a great example of, giving back when you have received more than you could ever deserve. And so that's kind of started the mentorship from my father, which then led, as I was young, he started his own company when I was 10 years old. And so I knew at a young age that I wanted to be my own boss. And he gave me the life lessons of surround yourself with people smarter than you, and have great mentors and these great experiences and how you treat other people. So wonderful mentor. Has been super successful, and frankly, I think has been more successful in his giving back to the community than even in business, and he is extremely successful in his business as well.
So I think that's important. That's great. That's a wonderful story, and I think it's always something for everyone to, as a student. Your father exemplified it by fully engage yourself and immerse yourself in the activities as much as you can. It really does kind of help you figure out what you're good at and what you're not, and and I've always pushed for people to do as much as you possibly can and take on your plate as a student, and I appreciate that so much.
I think it's always really neat to reflect on mentorship stories, and it is interesting to realize how often a parent can be that person. Very fortunate, to have a childhood where you do have that type of influence, and so that's really neat. So as you think through, kind of as you're moving into now, maybe you're headed towards Furman, or you're maybe out of Furman, maybe another short story could you share with us? Maybe another mentor that maybe was a pivotal mentor as you kind of became into your young adulthood.
Sure. So it's amazing the things that you don't realize are happening, when they happen. And then you get to this point in your life and you look back and you realize it's happened for so long. I'm just now realizing it, but you can kind of put the whole body of work together. So from birth until I realized it, which I was probably in college by the time I started realizing. So my grandparents, my mom's parents, moved here in 1950, and my grandfather at that point came to town to run the Belk Simpson, which was on Main Street. It's where Poinsett Plaza is now. It was connected onto the bank that's still there. Right downtown. And, Greenville was a small place. And my grandfather had this knack he was everybody's first job. For us, it was Baskin Robbins at McAllister Square. But in the 50s and 60s, all of my mom's friends would work at Belk's, either in the soda shop in there or in one of the departments. And so my grandfather died about a year and a half before I was born. At 63 years old. He's president of the Downtown Merchants Association, dean of the Sunday School at First Baptist Church, on. But I had met these people my entire life that would come up to me and they would say, I used to work for your grandfather. He was the best boss I ever had. And so he became a huge mentor, and I never met him. And it was all through the stories of these people that had worked with him. And so the common theme was, back in those days, the stores all closed Wednesday afternoon. It was the only time they were closed, of course, closed on Sunday. And so he would not ever go in his office. And so he spent the hours the store was open on the floor, helping salespeople, teaching them their craft. And he was, again, never met him, but, I'm going to show you the way and lead by example, boss. And so he would be in his office after dinner, so the store would close, he'd go home to have dinner with his wife and his 3 little girls, and then he'd go back down to the store and he'd work for a couple more hours and do everything that had to happen in the store. My mother and her sisters, for years, they thought that he ran the 3 Belks that were in town. And it wasn't till maybe a decade ago that I was interviewing one of his former employees before they all got too old, who's also a famous Change the South, but Jack Cuney, who was Mr. Simpson's son-in-law, who's huge fingerprints on our community as well. He and his wife. And so I was interviewing him and he's like, your grandfather didn't run those 3. He was in charge of all 36.
Wow. Wow.
And, so just kind of an example, my mom and her sisters, they didn't even know what all he did. I mean, they knew he went to all the stores, but they didn't realize that he was in charge of the entire operation, which was kind of neat. So really as a leader, that was always my goal of, one, it'd be great for everybody to say I was the best boss they ever had. But that was far less important to the how do I make them the best person they can be, and spend time with them.
Right.
And so, great mentor there, and really again, I've got a dozen, but my last mentor that I could not have done what I've done. It was Earle Furman, who started our company.
Right. Right.
So Earle. Great story of the Furmans and what Furman has meant for our state. And Earle knew me from birth.
Yeah.
Back to my grandfather, Earle was the bane of my grandfather's existence because Earle was a rambunctious little devil growing up. Not any different than any of the Reed boys growing up, or any of the good boys growing up. But he has a heart of gold.
Yeah.
And so, he started with his family's company when he got out of grad school. He went to Furman, of course, and then went to Chapel Hill to get his master's and came back and started working for his grandfather and his uncle at the Furman company. And Earle, his uncle ended up selling the company, and Earle left and started our company in the mid-'80s. Earle is the most generous person on the planet. A decade ago, when we restructured the company in the downturn, which is a whole entire podcast in and of itself.
Oh yeah,
being in the real estate business through the downturn.
That's right.
But in the downturn, we restructured the company, and as we came to announce it to all the staff, the only thing that we could come up with was, if you were to define Earle, and you had to put it into one word. And so I gave a soliloquy that was Gordon Gekko's soliloquy from Wall Street with the word change. And if you want to look up that Gordon Gekko and take greed out and put generosity in everywhere he says, it's Earle Furman. He's the most generous man ever with his time, certainly with his money, but really with his time. And what he gave to everybody and what he gave to me and all the younger partners. And, clearly, he gave me the opportunity to run the business when I was 36 years old. And even before that, when I was 30 and I made partner, he gave all of the young partners the opportunity. He said, "This is your company.
Wow.
Y'all tell me what you want to do." And so his leadership style was simple. He wasn't going to answer a question for you. If you went in with a question, he would ask a question until you came up with the answer.
Yes.
That's interesting.
And so
that's so lovely to hear because, everyone, that I meet with knows who NAI or Furman is, but they don't know that story. And that's fascinating, and I love to hear that, and that's so nice to hear that it was very much in his DNA that it wasn't just business, win. It was this is your company. What do you want to do? And the generosity is amazing.
It's truly what has set us apart and made us as successful as we are. Was he gave away half the company initially, so he brought in shareholders and gave them half the company, and that plan that he put in place allowed everybody ownership. When he owned half the company, he capped his vote at 15% to prove to the shareholders, like, I'm not in charge here. I want to do what everybody else wants to do. And we talked to clients that are begging other NAI offices and law firms and accounting firms that say, we want to do what y'all did. Like, well, you've got to start the way Earle started, which was you got to let go.
Yeah.
And
Right.
you got to
Very difficult to do.
give up this control that you think is so important to the next generation, and see what happens. And it's the same thing that happened to Harper, about a decade ago, as Doug was saying, what I want this company to be. And so it's been fun to watch the people that do that, because they can truly allow their people, to be unbounded by rules and regulations and really grow the business based on their skill set. So Earle, we always come back to, we talk about having the little bracelets, which is, not necessarily sacrilegious, but what would Earle do? When we're in a business situation.
No, that's right.
Right. And every time we can take a situation and pretend we're him, we come out with the outcome that's a win for everybody.
Yeah, that's amazing.
When you think about some of those generous examples and some of those, I guess, characteristics that he shared with so many during that time when y'all were, particularly when you were younger, do you recall an instance or anything that would have happened, throughout this time, which if you'd have done over, you should have done what Earle said, or did you do something Earle didn't want you to do, or was it pretty much a scenario where, okay, well, let's just keep going on this path? But do you ever have one of those things that you think about, God, I should have done it the way Earle did, or maybe that kind of moment?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's happened all the time.
All the time.
Oh, sure.
All the time, yeah. And seriously, it's amazing. It is always, if you'd used his benchmark, you would have had the right answer.
Yeah.
And it's all the time where I'm not really sure, maybe, I'll just pay this person a referral on this deal and I'm going to pay them 15% and they probably ought to get 25%. And then the deal blows up and it didn't work.
Right.
And, if you had just done what, you knew you should have done the first time,
that's right.
The deal probably would have gone through or whatever the case. So there are many with that. There are many with hiring. We've had some hiring, like anybody. You get somebody and you hope and you pray that it's going to work out, and you hope and you pray that Earle will tell you what to do. More so, a decade ago.
Sure. Sure.
And so, but there are lots of opportunities, and I think the strongest thing, and I think the thing that has made South Carolina and North Carolina and the Southeast in general really work is being able to pivot quickly. And I think Earle really, he wanted you to make a decision, but he was going to make sure you made a decision. Most often with our clients, we're doing about 2,000 transactions a year, and the people that aren't meeting their expectations are the ones that take their time making decisions. The ones that are happy making a bad decision.
Right.
I think that's
Learning
one of the
from
things.
a failure.
And they change. They quickly pivot. And I think that's something, you talked to her a little bit about family and so I have 3 children and my kids, I've always said, I lose more than anybody And they get this look on their face like, oh my goodness, daddy's a loser? I was like, I win more than anybody too.
There you go.
Yes.
And it's all about trying. It's all about making decisions and pivoting, especially in our world, in the sales world. The people that can understand that a loss is one step closer to success really can go a long way. And so it's fun to see now that my kids are teenagers, or 2 of them are teenagers. It's fun to see them exhibiting some of the things that you hope that they would pick up on as you're raising them.
I think from some of your mentorship, and whether it be from your grandfather or your father, or maybe even from Earle, it's an interesting. Tell us a little bit. What's maybe one thing you've done for your children, or maybe push them in a direction that might be a little unique?
So my wife and I, we always say it to each other. We're going to give our kids a lot to talk to a therapist about one day because, we are free range parents.
Yeah.
Right.
So we want them to fail. But we're also pushier than a lot of people are. And maybe it's because I get so many resumes and I interview so many young people that I have this really high bar for them.
Mm-hmm.
But my mother, the deal growing up with us was, of course, we didn't have TVs in our room or any of that other kind of stuff that kids have now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was a little different in the 80s. But my mother's deal with all of us was that we could stay up as late as we wanted, ever. So long as we were reading in bed. And so, when you're little, you want to stay up. And so, both of my parents were school teachers. So I think a little bit of it came from that initially. Of course, my dad was a school teacher, turned banker, turned real estate developer, which is also a great other story. But so my mother's deal.
So you're telling me there's a chance, huh?
There's a chance.
I was a school teacher for 9 years.
I forgot that. Yeah.
But anyway, sorry.
So there's a chance. Yeah. So with our kids, if they're reading, then basically we'll let them do whatever they want. And so when they turn 10, they got How to Win Friends and Influence People, which I just think is a core book for people to understand.
Yes.
And I want them to read it every year.
Yeah. Can I add? My brother led me on to that book, and I got a couple books by the bedside table. Usually don't finish it because I fall asleep, but I have it on audiobook and I listen to it. And I've gone through it once and I'm replaying it. And I don't listen to it every day, but it's still just ongoing. You can listen to it in snippets and it's great. And tell everyone again what the book is. So
How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it is basically human nature in one book.
Yes.
That's all it is.
It's amazing.
And how do you allow grace to people? And it's the way Earle, I don't know if Earle's even read it. He's never said he has, but it's the way Earle has always operated the business. Yeah. And as your children get older, there's nothing better in life, period, than having an adult come up to you and say something positive about your child.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh,
absolutely.
yes.
There's no amount of money, there's no anything that you would ever want to have other than that. So I was with somebody yesterday, and they were sharing a story of somebody that my 15-year-old ran into, and he ran into his the OB that delivered him.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so my 15-year-old is 6 feet tall, 190 pounds. He takes after my middle brother, so he's going to be massive. Yeah. And so he sees this doctor, and he goes up to him. He's like, "You delivered me," and he talks to him. He has a conversation like he's an adult.
Right.
Wow. And so that doctor told someone else, who then told me. He's like, "It's amazing." He's like, "I wish they would all do that." So, and I give a lot of that back to the stuff that we have, encouraged our children to do.
That's right.
And my wife, we've been fortunate enough to that my wife has been able to stay home with our kids, and she's they will all tell you that she's a very strong encourager.
Right, absolutely. That's right.
That's a good way. That's a good way of putting it.
And there may be a bribe or two in there as well. Right. I may have been bribed as a child, which was shocking. That turned into a 100% commissioned salesperson with a mother that would bribe us every now and then to do the things she wanted us to do.
We're going to talk a little bit in a minute about Jon's ability to really carry through with that, being that best boss. So we'll come back here in just a minute.
Hey guys, welcome to Southbound Podcast, about stories from influential people shaping the South. Today's guest, we have Jon Good, who is the CEO of NAI Earle Furman, NAI Columbia, NAI Piedmont Triad. And he's got a great story, several great stories to share. He was the 15th employee at NAI, now grown to 160 employees, one of the top brokerage firms in the Carolinas, and he's our first podcast guest, and we love having him on board today. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. And Jon, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit already, about your background, where you're from, some influential people. Tell us a little bit about some of what the culture is that makes NAI successful in the Carolinas. What all have y'all done that is built in within your DNA that has created such a success story?
Yeah, so I think culture is almost a word that's been overused by lots of organizations, but it's truly for any organization that's going to grow and be successful, you have to figure out what your culture is first, and then operate within it. Our culture, which really goes back to our one adjective of Earle, of generosity, really led to everything that we've done. Mm-hmm. And so for us, it's working with each other. The collaborative nature of our company compared to many of our peers is unheard of. Yeah. So our offices are always going to the other offices and meeting with each other and talking about, this is the way I was trying to do this deal. And they learn another way to do it, and they end up doing more transactions, and they can be more successful for their clients, more successful for themselves, all through it. There are lots of other NAI firms that we don't own. There's about 375 that we don't own. And within that organization, NAI, we have become a global leader. We're one of the top 10 NAI firms in all of those. And you're talking about, California and New York and all these other big markets. Yeah. And it's truly back to that culture piece that we have. And so we will share the tools and the best practices and all the things that we can with those people. Same with our other clients. Our other clients are professional service firms, are routinely asking us, how have we grown? How have we organized and managed our processes? And we're always happy to share what we would call kind of our intellectual property with these folks, because frankly, within the NAI group, we want them to all be successful. And for us, we think the people that don't have the generosity culture, we've said before that our success was sown by the seeds of our culture. Yeah. And so if you didn't have that, you're not going to be able to achieve it anyway. So I've had, people are like, you're too open with how y'all do all these things. And we're like, our competitors can't do it. They don't have our culture. Yeah. And that's not a bad thing. It's just they've got to operate within their culture to be successful. It only works because of our culture. That our success has only come out of that. So it's been a fun thing to come into the middle of and have the opportunity to take it to the next level. Yeah.
Man, that's fascinating. That's I love that, because it's like, hey, look, we're going to go deep on this play. You got to stop it. You got to stop the receiver. Even if they know that it's going to be a run play or a pass play, you can copy it all you want to, but you got to actually live within your culture. I appreciate that so much.
You touched on your grandfather, being in charge of 36 stores, but being a boss that was on the floor, that was moving around, helping people. How have you carried that over to your floor?
It was interesting. The shareholders, we had 8 shareholders when they asked me to take Earle's job. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. There's no way. I don't want to do this. I just want to do my deals and not have to deal with, all the administrative headaches that come along with being in charge, that people that aren't in charge, it looks like a great job. Sometimes it's not. But so when I made the switch and was immediately, on the other side of the table from everybody, and the one that was going to hold people accountable, I had to fall back on, again, what I was raised knowing, and it was how do I lead these people by showing them how to do it. And so, yes, I have to be tough sometimes, but really it's just showing them how to hold themselves accountable and how can they be the best that they can be. And the people that are going to succeed with a little direction. The ability to step back and see them from afar. So, I have lots of blind spots. We all have blind spots, and it's hard to see those on yourself. And so having some outside opinion of some things that you can do to improve yourself goes so far. And again, many of our competitors, they don't have anybody doing that. Their folks are just kind of left to their own. And I used to say it's the food in the teeth.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you're working in an organization that you don't love each other enough that you can say, you got a big piece of lettuce stuck in between your two front teeth.
That's right. That's right.
It's amazing to me. So we have to be able to tell our people if there's something that's glaring that they can tweak so they can be their best self. And so that part, it's truly the fun part of it and the tough part. And it's the part I had to force myself to do. Those hard conversations, when I started my position and changed from a broker to being in charge, again, they sort of outvoted me and talked me into doing it. And so I actually started a list of the things I didn't want to do just to remind myself and really I'm a planner and a list maker anyway, but it was really how do I do it better? So I started a list of things that were outside of my comfort zone. Shortly thereafter, I realized in my life as a whole, when I did something that was tough, I made money off of it. It was I fixed something, and I really became aware of the fact that people that avoided those tough conversations, it cost them. And so, having those difficult conversations with employees has truly been something that I got good at. And within a month or so, I threw my list away because I just knew when something tough came in front of me that the outcome was going to be worth it to deal with it.
Yeah.
Your firm and our audience, our listeners out there represent generations, young and seasoned. And so, I guess managing that dynamic can sometimes be quite interesting, particularly in a vibrant economy where we don't have the luxury of time to provide responses. Responses have to be, as you mentioned earlier, decisions need to be made. What are a couple of tips you might give a person listening that is just now getting into the industry, as well as maybe and then think through maybe a person that's well seasoned, that's kind of seen it all, done it all. We've got all that in between in our industry, so that to me it'd be an interesting take on what's happening in your world.
We can tell how successful we are based on the number of resumes that come in for people that want to be salespeople.
Right.
Yeah.
When times are tough, we don't get any.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Markets like we are right now, we get lots and lots of people interested in coming in the business. And I think it's all the same thing for the new people. It's number one, understand it is far more difficult than you could ever imagine. And that's it, any industry.
Yeah.
If I'm sitting back and want to have Harper Construction build me 300,000 square feet, I'm like, it's a box. I mean, come on, it's concrete walls and a little metal roof. I mean, what's taking y'all so long? It seems so simple.
Absolutely.
Right.
Knowing that I couldn't even get the site level. If I had to, I couldn't do anything. And they have, 100 years experience figuring out how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the new people, understanding what it's going to take education wise, and what they're going to have to put into it. It's to get into our industry, it's a 100-hour-a-week job for 2 to 3 years. And that's all education that you've got to we have the information, but they've got to lead themselves through that process and really desire to do it. we have also had lots of success with seasoned business people that have sold a company or had a successful career. I've got another person with a successful career who's going to move and transition into the business. And for them, they understand business and they understand sales, but it's about for me, it's a consumption of information because the more that you can learn and figure out and really understand gives you the creativity to solve problems.
Right.
And we're successful when we're solving people's problems. And it's every business on the planet. And so the more problems you can solve for a client, the more successful you can be. And the company, my role in the company is really to break down the barriers so our people can solve problems for their clients. And when you look at our company over the last 20 years, it's really been creative solutions to real estate problems. And then how do you take that to the masses? Because if one person's having a problem, there's going to be somebody just like them that's having that problem. So how do you find them and go say, hey, I can also help you better than anyone else. Here's my solution.
Yeah.
And so but it's certainly fun to watch the new people versus the seasoned folks out there. And for us, it really ties back into setting goals and business planning. So when I was a new broker with the company, we had a managing partner in the firm. There were 4 shareholders in the firm back then, and you had to turn in a business plan in January, and it went in a file, and nobody ever looked at it again. It was the craziest thing ever. In about my 3rd year, one of the other young brokers came to me and said, let's do these together at the same time. So 3 of us met on a Saturday in our office and sat down and we did our business plan together. And it became this, what worked for you, what didn't work for you, how do you identify great leads, how do you qualify people, all these kinds of different things. And by the 2nd year, that was a company program. And so we would go off site and spend a day. And it used to be all of us because there were only a dozen of us that were there selling. Now it's about 4 or 5 days in groups of about 25 to get everybody in. But it's been a wonderful tool that then, as it evolved, it comes all the way down to where that annual plan is broken down to a weekly plan. So it doesn't go in a drawer. And so everybody's got, for me to achieve these goals that I've set for myself, that they can be whatever they want. And we talked a little bit about family. I mean, in our business plan, there's a whole section on family. There's nothing worse than being successful and making a lot of money and realizing you hadn't taken your wife out on a date or you hadn't taken your kids on a vacation or any of that other kind of stuff. So all that's in our business plan that they also do turn in. But it breaks it down to, for me to achieve this, what do I have to do this week? If I'm going to, do 100 industrial leases this year, how many people am I going to have to talk to? And where am I working those lists? And how do I do that every week? And it rolls up into that annual plan. So we were very fortunate that structure was there. And happy that we were able to tweak it as it went along. So it's been successful for all the parties that participate.
And I think goes along your lines of that never stop learning too. I think with applying those business plans.
And also following in your grandfather's footsteps of being the example, setting that trend with you and a couple other brokers and then it becoming company policy. I think that's also amazing as well. Jon, I was going to ask you real quick, I've been blessed to have a few conversations with you, and I think that also led me to say, man, so many people got to hear what you have to say because you do things very well. But one of the things that I think that, in real estate, you always kind of have to have a little bit of that crystal ball, see what's going on trend-wise within, the migratory movement to the South and how our market's changing and e-commerce and all that stuff. Tell us a little bit about, what trends you're seeing currently in the market and what all you guys are doing to stay ahead.
Sure. So we think the Southeast is really poised for success for another decade, if not 2 more decades. You can see it over the population shifting, the southern shift that has been occurring. And we feel like that was a trend that was pre-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
People were already coming here.
Yeah.
It's a great place to live. Our markets, we like tertiary markets, and it's back to, we were raised in Greenville. We understood that. And so we know how to be successful there. That same business plan wasn't going to work in Atlanta or Charlotte,
right.
But it works great in Columbia. It works great in Greensboro and Winston-Salem. So we think that you will see a massive continuance of the population shift to the Southeast, driven by a multitude of things. I'll try to hit the highlights.
Sure.
Because again, it could be a whole podcast. So for 25, 30 years, we've seen lean manufacturing that has tried to squeeze the inventory supply out of manufacturing. And so that's raw materials and that's finished product. And so COVID really put a little shock to the system where people, we still can't get chips to make cars. We can't get all kinds of different things. Right now, we can't get gasoline. So you have these supply chain issues that we spent 25 years to try to get to this just in time. And somebody convinced somebody somewhere that, you're taking this little bit of money out of your operating and you're making more money on what you have. Right now, since COVID, the supply chain managers, they are all working to increase their raw materials and their finished good materials. Mm-hmm. And what that looks like is 1 to 3%, 3 to 5% kind of numbers. And it equates to millions of square feet of space. Right. And with the population shift and the Panama Canal expansion that happened several years ago, we think Charleston and Savannah and Richmond and all of the East Coast ports will continue to boom. And lots of logistics changes in all of our markets that we're in. So we're very excited about that growth. We're very excited about the people, the remote work. There are a lot of people that say that's going to kill office space and be this huge detriment. We think maybe it's certainly going to affect call center space. But for us, a lot of those people that are in those big major markets where they can work remotely, they're moving here. My CFO had a new neighbor that moved in next to her over the weekend from Washington State. We can live wherever we want. Why would we live in Washington State and pay the taxes of Washington State and pay what it costs to put our kids in school there when we can come somewhere else and keep our jobs? So we see it as a net win for the Southeast, right, and a loss for some of those other markets. Our land teams, one of our companies is a land and recreational company. Our land teams, if somebody wants to sell it, we've got 10 buyers.
Oh, wow.
And we think that's going to continue for the next decade in the Southeast, in the tertiary markets. Mm-hmm. The decade before, you saw an urbanization. The kids all wanted to live in the big cities. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a normal ebb and flow of the world. Everybody piled in, they're piling out.
Yeah.
Very excited.
That's kind of a testament to. I look at that as what you said the other day, how something can change things overnight. So you better be ready to pivot. And on that note, we'll pivot to as you think through the future. As you think through, be thinking about kind of where we might be headed. But one of the questions that I think is so important out there, and you get all kinds of answers when you talk to different people on this, but do you ever say no? Do you ever figure out that, hey, we got to look at this and say no?
Yeah. So, we're salespeople, mm-hmm. So we don't ever say no. That doesn't mean that we're going to say yes. So quite often it's how are you smart with your time? If somebody, I was a broker for a dozen years before I transitioned my role, and I sat next to Earle, in that time, and Earle was in charge, and people would have a question about a deal, and so they'd come into Earle's office and they say, "You got a minute?" And they just want to walk through the deal with him, and the minute was always 15 or 30 that they would lay out this transaction they were working on. And so when we changed, they just stopped the door early and they would turn into my office. And I quickly figured out how much time that was going to take. And for us, we had these folks that had been in the business 25 years and 30 years, people that had owned their own companies and they had been their own broker in charge, and they knew the answer to it. They just wanted to talk it out. And so on all of those questions, I said, "Yeah, I've got time, but not right now. Go back, send me an email." So we built a process around it to where they would go back and they would have to ask me those questions, the got-a-minute questions by email. But it was, who you represent and what's the deal? And by the end, they'd have to say, "What do you think you should do?" So that was the key part. What do you think you should do? Mm-hmm. And frankly, by the time they wrote the whole email and they got to, "What do you think they should do?" They would delete it and not even send it to me because they knew what to do. They just need to organize their thoughts in their head. And it was a clear answer so often. And so I think that's with again, we've got lots of businesses that have spun out of our company and ideas and initiatives and things like that. And it's always, that's a great idea. Finish the plan and the budget and what the impact is going to be. And, we're going to let you do it. We don't ever say no to somebody that has an idea. And that's how we have Furman Capital Advisors and Huff Creek and our franchise services division and all these other things that we do. It was all somebody's idea, but we made them do it. If somebody's going to come in mm-hmm. and say, "Oh, we should go do this," and they think somebody else is going to do it, they've lost their mind because we're all already busy. But they're all great ideas. And so it's how do you capture that great idea and give them the control to go and run with it and stand behind them and support them and say, "Here's a similar initiative we had. This is how it worked last time. Hopefully that can speed up so you won't make as many mistakes as they did on the first one."
Yeah, exactly. I think that's brilliant, and I think what it does is it gives you time to just sit back and reflect and ask yourself the questions before you. And it is nice to always have a little bit of a soundboard, but on the sake of time, especially for you, you go think it through before you come to me with a actual bigger question that you can't make a decision on. And right. I think that's brilliant.
I also think, in the long run, you are actually being generous by allowing them to grow on their own. And you're going to give them oversight. You're going to give them direction when they need it. But it's not just unnecessary time being spent. It's time that is better spent.
Right. When I started with in this role, 10 years ago, it was very apparent very quickly to me that we didn't have anybody. The company was all independent people. They're all 1099 contractors. And so we didn't have any leaders. They're all used to taking care of themselves. Mm-hmm. And so we really had kind of a leadership development problem within the company. And I said, as we can train ourselves to be leaders, then we can grow. And it's why we're 5 times larger now than we were a decade ago, because we allowed people to be their own leader and then support them as a leader and go. Yeah.
Hey, Jon, tell us a little bit more about your family, about raising children, and some of the things that you've kind of bridged between your personal and professional life, and I think it's very insightful to share.
Sure. So, I think it's certainly kind of goal planning and that kind of stuff too with my wife and I and our kids. So my wife and I, we don't have a budget that we operate off of. I've been fortunate to be married to one of the most frugal people on the planet, which has been wonderful.
Yeah.
And before we had kids, extremely successful, and made a great living, which allowed me to get started in the business, which my kids weren't there, so they don't appreciate that.
Yeah, right.
But we had a huge head start with all she did. But she and I, we do an annual plan of how we're going to operate the house. And it's basically kind of pay yourself first. Those of you that have had children, the expenses that are coming. And so in about 30 minutes now, we can do our annual plan. And it's, okay, where are we going to save first, since, the 529s for college, and it's, my 401k and paying down the credit line on the house or whatever the case may be. And we organize those in a top 10 and how much, because the 529 might be on there twice. I want to do it first of X amount, but then if I've had a good year and I was able, to buy her the new car, which might be number 6, I can come back to the 529 and put a little extra in as number 7.
Wow.
We've gotten that process down and then transitioned it, to our children. So when we start anything with the kids, they have to write down their plan for the year, the school year. So what do you want to do this year? Fun stuff, non-fun stuff. How do you see yourself doing in your activity or your sport this year? And so it's been fun to watch them have, so my kid, I do it on my phone. It should be my kids that do it on my phone, but my kids actually have a little, memoir diary kind of thing that they write that kind of stuff in. And for them to be able to come back and say, I said I wanted to make varsity lacrosse as a freshman and I made it. And all, it's a powerful tool for them to understand that, once you write that goal down, I can't remember the stat, but it's, 75% higher likelihood that you're going to achieve the goal once you've taken the time to write it down.
Right. And don't just file it away. Have it out.
You've got to review it quite often.
Right.
I wrote my first goals when I was 14 in Sunday school. I had this Sunday school teacher who could write in cursive across the board, perfectly spaced. He's crazy. I'd never seen anything like it. His name was Eddie Good. So my father, again, school teacher turned real estate developer.
Right.
But he made us write our goals down at a young age. And we had to turn in our goals to him every year, along with a personal financial statement from the time I was about 14 or 15. And I've transitioned that part with my kids into our regular business planning. So part of our business plan for our brokers and our property managers is a personal financial statement as kind of the guide of why do all of this and work so hard if you're not saving and investing, and you're not going to have anything at the end, which has led to, if I have one of my kids that says, hey, I want to do X, great, write the plan down. What's the first step? And let's, plan it out and operate in a manner that, I did that with the oldest is 15. I want a car. Okay. What are you going to do to earn your way to get the car? What are the things that you're going to maintain, like a, honor roll and all this other kind of stuff. And when he writes it, and he says, this is the way I'm going to do it, if he doesn't follow it, it's real easy to say, sorry, it's parked for 9 weeks. So
that's that toughness that actually turns into good.
Down
no
the
doubt.
And that's, it's so simple to say, hey, just write goals down, but then also kind of hold it accountable as well is also, kind of that's the crux of it right there.
Right.
And that's brilliant. And
where is your stance on you've achieved your goal, recognition and reward? I feel like there's a big sentiment out there, young and seasoned, that there's a time and place for recognition, and there's a time and place for reward, and there's a time and place to pat on the back. But our industry is so demanding for these responses. It's really okay, you get a little clap, and now it's time to move on.
Right.
What have you done for me lately?
Yeah, what have you done for me lately? But I think that question is interesting to different age groups, because I think different age groups maybe sometimes want a different reward.
Right.
But in the end, I think everybody. What do you say to that?
In the beginning, it was funny because, so when I joined the company, albeit very small, there were 4 shareholders. But if they did awards, they were the only ones that won. So it's how do you recognize the younger people that are kind of harder charging and pushing. And so you got to really figure out what are the things that we need to reward so they can achieve the success that they're looking for. And so we're big reward recognition people. And it's easy in a sales organization to set goals. And we do a couple things that are, this is goals for everybody. And we do some that this is goals for individually, kind of based on your tenure with the company, and reward those things. So extremely important if you can hold to it. And fortunately, now we're large enough that we have people that aren't shareholders yet that are winning those awards and doing the big transactions and bringing in the big clients and all those kinds of things. So it's been fun to watch. Most of the time, I see organizations start strong and not finish that. And that's just a manpower organization, behind it, to have somebody in charge of it. So our big reward for the company culminates in kind of a weekend outing.
Nice.
That spouses come to, and your administrative coordinators for your team, if you make it, they make it with their spouse. And so it's a big to-do. But again, it's back to our culture. That's all run by committee. So I've got a committee of 3 of the people that said, we want to be in charge of this and put our fingerprint on it. And certainly it was challenging during COVID. So it relates to our children. I mean, we're terrible at making, we have lots of rewards to hold them accountable. And again, more so than people would want us to generally, so if they ever ask for anything, and maybe it's my sales background, but if they can't ask me for anything without me getting something for it.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I mean, so just, last weekend, my youngest is a builder, creator. So he started thousands of companies, in his mind and with his buddies. And so he's always doing something. He's taught himself how to play the guitar and all these other kinds of things. And so he wanted a harmonica because he thought there was a chord in the harmonica. And so, I said, that's great. Yeah, I'll buy you a harmonica if you win the soccer tournament this weekend. It's terrible, to put that most people wouldn't want to put any pressure on their children or anything else. But, I know his team was number 1 and they should dominate everybody. And they did. They dominated everybody. But literally, we were pulling out of Mesa, sitting in 30 minutes of traffic to get through that one traffic light. For anybody that's in Greenville that has kids that play soccer at CESA, they understand. And we get in the car. He's like, "Can we go to Mass General now?"
Absolutely.
They don't forget. They don't forget.
$7.
Right.
So,
it's worth it. Hey guys, we're back here with Jon Good, and we're gonna finish up here asking a few more questions here with Jon. I think one of the very interesting things about you is you were named CEO at the age of 36. And I'm 37, so immediately, you've done a great job of sharing the stories of the things that you've leaned on, the influential people in your life that have helped you be successful. But what are some of the other resources that you've had to lean on to help your success?
Yeah, so when my partners asked me to take over a decade ago, I told them, I said, I didn't have a clue what I was doing.
Yeah.
And they needed to give me some resources, some money, once I found a way to figure out what I was doing. And shortly thereafter, I was actually at a party, and I got to give Thomas Young credit. So Thomas was asking me how my new role was going. Thomas runs Young Office in Spartanburg and Greenville. And I was telling him how great it was and how we just didn't have any systems and processes to run the business, but how I was loving the new challenge. And he said, "You need to join YPO." And I was like, "YPO, what's that?" And he said, "It's a young presidents organization. You know, it's started, you know, for young presidents to figure out what they were doing, basically." And so, as it turns out, I had some other friends that were members of YPO, and so I started the process of finding out about YPO and joined YPO. And it's a network of about 20,000 presidents that are under the age of 45 across the globe. Phenomenal resources. So I could literally reach out and talk to presidents at Fortune 500 companies that had started young, and maybe their company got bought or whatever, and they rolled up. And so it gave me an independent board of directors that were running their own businesses, and a place to go find people when I had a problem. And something that, you know, maybe I want to rework the compensation structure of our sales team.
Yeah, sure.
You know, so I can start that from scratch, or I could go into the system and I could send an email to 20 people and to get 4 examples emailed to me.
Wow.
And somebody called me and say, "Let me tell you how we came up with this structure." So that became a pivotal tool for our company. And it was not an inexpensive tool to become a member. And it's often when I meet new young leaders, I tell them about the success we have. And you really can't measure it. If I were to go back and delete everything that YPO taught me that we implemented into our organization, we'd be half the size that we are now. Yeah. And it's back to those mentors and those leaders, and truly a sharing and caring kind of environment. Mm-hmm. And you don't even realize the power through it. You know, I've been at meetings in ICSC is a big real estate meeting, and their main one's in Vegas every year. And YPO has a meeting in the meeting while you're there. You know, I walked into the room, you know, for one of those early on, and your name tag doesn't say what you do. It just got your name and where you're from. And I walked in to Greenville, South Carolina. And this guy comes up to me and is like, "Greenville, I developed an apartment complex there." And he did McBee Station, and he was the money for the local people that did it out of New York. And so it's really opened doors for us through its organization. And so great tool for any young leader. But it is difficult to get in. You have to have a fairly sizable company to qualify to get in. It's just not something that somebody can join, which is also beneficial because it keeps the shared experience is what it's all about. And so they have a minimum level, so you have something to share yourself. Right. So it's been awesome. Yeah,
that's fascinating. I always, you know, think that there's, you know, 3 things that make a really good leader, and that's, you know, a motivator, a problem solver, and a steward to their resources. And leaning on resources is always a beneficial thing if you can find the really good ones and stuff. And so, you know, that also wants me to ask you the question, just and kind of ending on this podcast today, you know, going back to the trends. What's something that you kind of always kind of go to help you identify the new trend and you know where things are moving?
So there's a number of ways that we do it, and it kind of goes back to our planning process and back to reading and everything. So one of my favorites is really kind of the theory of constraints. And so you kind of sit down and you say, what's constraining my business or my client, this customer's business? What do we see that's happening out there? And it's a process that you can look up and kind of follow through to say, if I can take away constraints, then what happens? You know, if I can knock down the barriers for your business, how is your business going to react to that? And it's allowed us to really dig in to our people that are on the front line, so they're understanding these constraints and these obstacles that their clients are seeing. And really, if I had to put on a set of ice skates, I'd fall over. But it's Wayne Gretzky that said, you know, skate to where the puck's going, and the open space And it's allowed us to think that way about our business, to get out in front of trends. And so we are constantly trying to think about the shifts. So what does the shift in e-learning do? It's back to the housing boom that's going on. So many people, yes, there are people moving here, but it's also people that are constrained to their house, so they want a better house.
Right.
That's driving the values going through the roof. So it's really a tool that we have used to overlay onto our clients to really help them be successful. And of course, if they're successful, we're going to be very successful also. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's incredible. Let me think here. What would be another good question to ask?
I'm going to go off of the pivot statement that we are all exceeding kind of some expectations right now with the industry growth we've got going on. I've heard of many companies coming out of this pandemic with record backlog, with record years. What would you tell our audience if we'd kind of anticipated that hopefully we have another 10 to 20 years of solid growth? What would you tell our audience? How would we pivot in the event that you have to make a change? You have to make a model change. You have to make a business change, or you have to make a management change. Even in good times, is there any I guess have your guard up in case you have to pivot?
So for us, every decision we made for the last decade was to be ready for this downturn.
Yeah.
When we went into 2009, we had, again, 8 shareholders. I was not yet leading the business. And the amount of money we had in the bank was not enough to keep the business moving forward because we weren't ready for it. The variety of our income streams was not enough. And so we spent this decade getting ready for the downturn. And when, we shut down in March of 20, and everybody thought the world was going to end, and we drew our credit line for the first time in 28 years to be ready for everything. and our business kind of kept going. And so I think it's being able to make decisions immediately and go back to the stories of, right now, my latest Netflix show was the blockbuster, the last blockbuster in Bend, Oregon. And you go back and you watch, their inability to pivot and make a change, because they passed on buying Netflix, when they could have bought it for nothing, because they said, what will we do with all this real estate? And so they allowed it to sink the company. And so you've got to be flexible immediately, and it goes to your culture. That's why our culture, we don't work well with big, slow, bureaucratic operations. So we don't even go after those clients because they can't react the way we react. We want somebody that's nimble and fast and creative. And it's really led to our success of making sure, the people we're going to work with are like us. And so it's been truly fun to see that. And then how do you underpin those decisions with basic principles that work? And because we have underpinned our principles with capitalism in business, and believe that setting the bar higher and getting people to push harder and faster, you'll get to the goal faster. But you have to give people that reward as well. And so it's neat to try to use basic principles of allowing people to fail and allowing people to succeed and earn the reward when they succeed. So we think the next decade is going to be lots of pivots.
Yeah, right.
We think what happens with tax policy is going to be crazy, and there are a million pivots depending on which tax policies they actually end up passing.
Absolutely.
And so all of our clients and all of the accountants and all the attorneys are all ready because what we, the Southeast and the U.S. has always been great at. We'll find a way to be successful.
Right.
You can put the barricade up, and we're going to find a way to get around it, under it, over it, through it. And so, but it's being willing to make those changes and understanding that the tough decisions we talked about a little earlier, those tough decisions are the ones that lead to success always. And as soon as I feel like we're afraid to make a tough decision, then I know we're backsliding. When I meet a customer and I think they're afraid to make tough decisions, I realize they're not the kind of people that we want to work with. The winners in this world can take those difficulties and realize that there's opportunity inside of those difficulties to succeed. And so it's exciting to look at the next decade and knowing, that we'll find somebody to take my spot in that next decade. So I can sit back and just do deals like Earle does now, or run one of these smaller divisions that we've created and get off of the road. But there's massive opportunity across the Southeast, and they're going to be winners and they're going to be losers. And it's not complicated to make sure you're on the right side of the aisle there if you're willing to do what it takes.
Well, Jon, that's fantastic. Well, we Patrick and I can't thank you enough for joining us here on the Southbound. You're certainly one of the most influential leaders shaping the South here in our region. And to all listening, I hope you've been able to connect with Jon. I hope you've been able to gain information where you've learned something new, and certainly hope all have been inspired by his stories that he's shared today, so that you can get out and act, and you can act in your careers, you can act in your family life, and hopefully just improve your overall quality of life and being in this region.
Thank you, Jon.
Thank you, guys. Been awesome.